This original WSRE presentation is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you.
From Newhart and Designing Women, Emmy-nominated actress Julia Duffy on this edition of Conversations. I'm Jeff Weeks. Thank you so very much for deciding to spend some time with us. We have with us Julia Duffy, who many of you know from Designing Women, Newhart, numerous other television programs. How are you?
I'm good.
Thanks
Happy to be here.
Well, we are so glad to have you. Most people probably remember you from the Newhart show, numerous Emmy nominations for that show. But and I want to talk about that. But before we do, what are you doing now?
Well, right now in LA or here in Pensacola?
Well, both.
Well, I'm here to do a benefit, to do love letters with my husband to raise money for what will be the Pensacola Shakespeare Festival. And in LA, I'm actually in the middle of rehearsals for a play also. So
you're doing more theater right now?
Yes.
Take me back to the beginning of your acting career. You were from Minnesota. How did you get from Minnesota into the Hollywood entertainment business?
Well, first I stopped off in New York, where I went to school, the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. And I was in New York for about 8 years, I think. I did soap opera there and a lot of theater in town, out of town. And then I moved to LA because eventually you have to do both coasts because the business is unfortunately divided by 3,000 miles. And then I started to work in television quite a bit.
What led to the Newhart role?
Let's see, so long ago. I did a guest shot. I actually had done a pilot for another series, and I did a guest shot on the first season of Newhart, playing a very fun character named Stephanie, but she didn't really have all of these Stephanie qualities yet. She was more of a plot device, as guest stars tend to be. And it was very fun. I worked very well with Bob. And then I went off, and I was very happy to have worked with Bob because that was kind of a goal of mine. I wanted to work with Bob Newhart. I'd always loved his old show. And then my series was picked up. It was called Wizards and Warriors. And about a year later, it was not renewed for the following season. No, was it that? Yeah, it was about a year later. And I'm trying to remember the sequence of events. But anyway, it was dropped and I was made a regular on Newhart.
Speaking of Bob Newhart, what was he like to work with?
He was probably even more fun than you think. His humor is wilder in person, not as low-key as it is in his public persona. And the combination of Bob and Tom and Peter was wild. That's like letting all the bad boys sit together in class. We just laughed all day long. I used to go home and tell my husband not to make me laugh because my stomach hurt from laughing all day.
How much of that show did Bob Newhart write?
He didn't write.
He didn't write at all?
No, he would occasionally come up with a story idea or just a joke area idea for a script, but he was very respectful of writers. He didn't impose himself. But any of us, if we had an idea, said it.
Was there a lot of ad-libbing going on, or did people pretty much stick to the script?
We didn't ad-lib in front of the cameras. We ad-libbed and fooled around a lot during rehearsal. There were times when you could palpably feel the tension on Fridays before the audience came in, because we shot the show on Friday night after rehearsing all week, because we realized that we'd never done it seriously all week. We'd been having too much fun, and then we would get very nervous.
Most viewers probably don't realize how you do a sitcom. Kind of take us through how the week goes leading up to when you tape the show.
Well, the typical schedule would be, if you were a Friday night show, is to have a read-through on Monday, usually not rehearse, sometimes rehearse. But the read-through is so the writers and the people from the network and studio could hear the script, make decisions about whether it worked or not and what should be changed, or if it was too long, how to cut it. And then Tuesday we'd come in with the changes, and we would rehearse all day, have a run-through late in the afternoon for the writers, discuss things that worked and didn't work with the writers. More rewrites. Wednesday was the same as Tuesday. That's the big rewrite night then. And on Thursday the cameras come in, and we spend the day camera blocking, which is more laborious than you would think, because you do play the scenes out as though you're doing live theater in a proscenium. And so the scene has to all play in one piece with the 3 cameras getting all the angles. And on Friday, there's more camera blocking and a dress rehearsal, and then the audience comes in, and we would do the show on Friday night.
Now, is it just live to tape, or is there a lot of breaks in between as you?
As few breaks as possible, because you're trying to do the whole scene and get audience reaction. That's the point of the live audience.
Right.
Sometimes a show is more complex, and you do have to break it up because you have to do coverage on certain shots, and you can't do it all in one piece. And we had a band and music and a warm-up guy who was very funny.
Right. Is it difficult to try to memorize all those lines in a short period of time during that 1 week? That's what I've always been amazed about.
Well, it's difficult because they change, and it's best not to memorize it too early in the week, because then you have, the yellow pages and then the green pages and then the blue pages in your head, and you're sort of going through them. Which line did we wind up saying here for the punchline? So we did tend to memorize late in the week. And some of us, and I won't say who, had little notes around the set with their lines on it. But
It's always curious how much of that
and
went
it might be why some of us had our reading glasses on a lot during the show.
When you get into that sort of an environment and you're surrounded by all those creative people, is it just, do you just come up to speed? I mean, is there just an energy level like it's like no other?
It could be absolutely wild during our rehearsals. And all we did was try to make each other laugh all day long. The stakes were high to make each other laugh. You wanted to be a funny person in that atmosphere.
Oh, I can imagine. What makes a good sitcom? I mean, obviously there are a lot of shows out there who have a lot of talented people, but not all of them are successful. What separates the Newharts and the Cheers and those types of shows from the rest?
I think you really have to believe it on some level. However wild and funny it is, you have to somehow believe this. You had to believe that Stephanie stayed there and didn't go back to her wealthy family because she really did feel a kind of family thing that she didn't feel in her filthy rich mansion in Newport, Rhode Island, or wherever it was. And you have to believe that they have these connections and need each other in some ways. And there has to be a certain tension between the characters. They want to impress each other. They don't want to let each other down. They're not sure if the other person likes them. All of those things really do have to be deeply felt. And I think that's what makes the audience want to spend the time with the people. Mostly, I think characters don't work and the writing doesn't work when it's a little too acerbic, too flip. The characters are too flip. When unsolicited scripts would come in from writers, that would always be the mistake they'd make, is they would have people putting each other down with one-liners. It's the easiest thing to write. And they wouldn't hire those writers. It didn't work.
Speaking of that, the entertainment environment today is so much different than what it was even 10 years ago or 20 years ago. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I think 2 words say it all, which is reality shows. It lowers the standard of what is entertainment to begin with. And the most sensational thing is what gets the attention. And it's, I think, incredible to me that they're trying to entertain American audiences without using actors. That's how it seems to most of us.
Right.
Or writers, although don't kid yourself, every reality show has a writer. However you think it's unscripted, they have writers. And it's as though we're taking the lowest level of talent, appeal, charisma, and putting it on camera for people to see, as though we want to make the audience feel that they too could easily be on TV and be famous without earning it.
Right. Well, it goes back to the old thing of these people are just famous for being famous, and many of them have no talent at all.
That's
or,
right.
In my opinion, I mean.
It's not a renaissance that we're having. It's very unfortunate. I have nothing good to say about it. I can't believe that it's lasted this long. But people have their habits, and I have it too. I sit down for an hour after dinner, and I'm tired, and I'm going to go to bed, and what I really want to do is watch some TV easily. And if all that's on are reality shows, I might wind up watching a reality show and don't want to, So then they get the ratings and they begin to think it's really what people want. But I don't think so.
Do you think that things will swing back in time?
I think they might swing back because the pendulum always swings, especially in our business. And financially, I think there are issues with syndication. Selling shows into syndication after they've been successful is a big part of the business model of television.
Right.
It's hard to watch reality shows in repeats because most of them are games with their contests with winners, and that's over by the time it's in syndication. Whereas, how many times can you watch an episode of MASH or Sex in the City or Two and a Half Men and still enjoy it and laugh because there's just so much depth and complexity to what they do.
Or Newhart?
Or Newhart. If a show has been successful, it's because it probably has a lot of places to go for the jokes, a lot of, what would you say, a lot of span to the characters. And, whether it's dramatic or comedic, there's a lot to watch. And that's why you'll watch them repeatedly. And that's why syndication can be very successful.
Do you think these days that television, and I'm not talking about, HBO and things of that nature, but I'm talking about just general cable television and network television, has it become too risque?
I do sometimes see shows on cable, and I'm not going to mention a show, that is very highly thought of. And when I watch it and they're swearing and using the F-bomb every other word, I'm not a prude at all.
Right.
It's just that I think, it seems kind of almost adolescent to me.
Right.
We're swearing because we can,
Right.
and not organic.
Right.
I mean, nobody laughed harder at Richard Pryor than me.
Right.
So obviously I'm not a prude. But somehow that came from a place, and it was part of something that worked on its own comedic level, on its own terms. But just swearing because you're on cable, or being naked, or talking about graphic sexual things because you're on cable, I don't know. There's a part of me that always goes, oh, come on, grow up. I'll bet you're talented enough to do it without that.
Right, right. What about agendas? It seems like sometimes we see television's more agenda-driven than it used to be, politically and otherwise.
I suppose it is. In the world of comedy, I never think about that, because in comedy, your agenda is to make people laugh. Right. I guess we could talk about South Park if we want to talk about agendas.
Right.
Maybe that's the most obvious one to talk about right now. And I'm surprised at how many people who are extremely, extremely liberal were very offended that the writers on South Park did what they did. I mean, they didn't air it, but then you could see it on the internet. Because, come on, if you're funny, can you find the joke without doing something that is going to cause an effect that has nothing to do with humor?
Right, right. Just seems like an awful lot of we're trying to shock everybody, and pretty soon we're all numb to the shock.
That's right. Yeah. And a real comedic writer would have no pride in getting a response through shock as opposed to true comedy.
Speaking of the internet, how is the internet going to change? It's already changed to a large degree, changed the way we get our entertainment, the way we get our information. In your opinion, how will it change the way we get our information and particularly entertainment over the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
One of the things that we in the business for a long time have noticed is that it's caused a lot of people to go into the business because it's very easy to figure out how to do that now.
Right.
When I was young, you had to be pretty obsessed to try to figure out how to go, if you came from the Midwest, how to go to New York or LA, get an agent and get in the business. There was no information out there about doing it. Right. So only the most driven people did it. Now anybody can figure out how to do it. They know where to go and what to do, and it's all laid out for them. The information is all there. So the competition is much greater for any young actor started. By competition, I mean the sheer numbers. If you're talented, you still should be able to prevail. But that's a big thing from the point of view of an actor, is how many more there are who actually have the gall to try it. And again, reality shows make you believe that this can be accomplished without a lot of effort. But, I like to see people accomplish things with proper effort and training and, passion.
If you're a young person today who aspires to be an entertainer, whether it be singing, acting, how would you go about doing it? What would you do to prepare yourself?
Well, I would hope that even though I was young and ambitious with stars in my eyes, that I would understand that it would be better in the big picture to be well trained, to be the real thing, that certain kinds of roles will always get cast because of someone's looks or being a very strong type, but the really good work, the stuff you should really want to do, will go to the talented people who have done their best to develop what they have.
Is theater the best place to develop?
Well, theater is the purest relationship between the actor and the role, and the actor and the audience, and the actor and his art or her art. So I can't imagine being fully trained and ready for your close-up without having had that kind of training. Yet I'm sure I could name many movie stars who started out in film, don't have a theater background, whose work I admire. So I can't say that that's the only way. But I can't even imagine training without having that background.
Which one is more difficult to do?
Everything has its own challenges. There are things about film that I find incredibly difficult. The 4 weeks of rehearsal in theater after you've done years of TV feels like heaven. It's absolutely a leisurely pace where you get to find so much, and I adore that collaboration. I adore the rehearsal process. I'm doing this play now, and we've just left the rehearsal room to go to the stage, and I didn't want to leave the rehearsal room. And I know I'll be happy again when the audience comes in, but I think that, I don't know which is the most difficult. I think it depends on the role. If you have all the right elements in place, regardless of the medium, and a wonderful director, wonderful material, great connection between you and the character, a wonderful cast, then it's not difficult.
Which one do you enjoy the most?
Well, I enjoy a great role the most that I have a strong feeling about, wherever it is. But there's a special place in my heart for theater because that feels like the way you should be working.
I've heard actors and actresses say that they get something different when they're doing theater because of that audience response. It's immediate, and it does something to boost your performance. You agree with that?
It really does. In fact, the director and I the other day of this play that I'm doing in LA were discussing how everybody isn't here yet. You know, we're looking at the rehearsal room because the audience isn't here. And in this play I have a lot of speeches, long speeches, soliloquies. It's a very unusual play. And my scene partner hasn't come in yet. That will be the audience. They'll tell me what's needed here, how much pace, where the pause is best put. I won't know that till they're there.
Good point. Switching over just for a second, you're doing the play here in Florida with your husband, who you've been married over 25 years?
Yes, 25 was our anniversary last summer.
Now, that almost seems unheard of in Hollywood. What's the secret?
Well, I don't think it's as unheard of as people think because you just don't get press coverage of the long marriages. But what's our secret? I give him a lot of credit.
Because he's an actor.
He's an actor, but he's always had a, I don't know, sort of a vision of what a relationship can be that he believed in strongly. And that was, I don't know, that was a very strong thing, I think, that he believed it could be that good. And but I guess I give us both credit. We understood where you compromise and where you give the other one space. And I think it's almost like any other relationship, except that you're doing it constantly.
Does the ego, because I mean, those of us who are in television or radio or acting or performers, all of us carry around a certain amount of ego, probably more than most. Is that a challenge when both of you are in the same industry?
Well, I don't know if I affect his ego very much or if he affects mine. I think we're both more affected by the person who got the role we wanted, or you know, not getting a role or something like that. there are outside forces affecting our egos much more.
Yeah, I guess the point I was getting to, you always hear about these celebrities who get together and all of a sudden one's career does better than the other and it creates issues. So you have to be very secure within yourself, I would think, in that industry.
Yeah, maybe that happens when one's a movie star and one isn't, but I don't know, I never think of us that way.
Yeah, just good solid relationship and cheering for each other, I guess, is probably more so than
Yes,
anything.
and the bond that I couldn't have with somebody who isn't an actor because we understand what we're going through. I was preparing for an audition last year for a play that I really wanted to do, and it was a very difficult preparation. It required a lot. I had to do a big, huge, dramatic drunk scene for the audition. And I said, I can't do this with you in the house. And he said, okay. And a couple days in a row, he just left the house in the middle of the day and went and did something because he completely understood that I had to be alone to do it. And he was recently auditioning for something. And I said, I think I'm going to leave. And he said, no, it's okay. And I said, no, I think you should be alone for a while.
When you're playing a character, do you bring that character home, or are you able to shut it off when you walk out of the theater or out of the TV studio?
I don't know if I bring the character home, but you do sort of bring that energy, that creative energy home, and you don't know what to do with it. In LA, we always have a long drive because it's LA, and I think, well, I'm glad the drive is this long. It'll take me that long to unwind. The character will affect me in other ways, but I don't know if he would ever say I bring the character home.
Yeah. So you're not like some of these people you hear about that sort of get wrapped up in the character and can't get away from it, so to speak.
I think I have been that way on the set during rehearsal periods. Yes, I think that would be observed of me, but not so much at home.
What do you want to do moving forward?
Oh, the future, huh?
The future.
I should think about that. You're right. I would love to do more theater. I'm happy to do it. It's nice to be solvent enough to do it because it's never going to pay well. And we have an empty nest only recently, and I would like to be able to enjoy that by doing the things I really like to do. I don't think in terms of building a career at this age. If other good things happen to me, if I have my Betty White phase of life, that'd be swell.
Absolutely.
But I don't think in those terms anymore, career terms.
I read somewhere where you said there are more opportunities for women as they get older in theater.
Well, the roles are better. That's actually when they start to get good.
Okay.
The ingenue roles, I mean, I was such an ingenue. The ingenue roles were kind of all the same. They only had so much depth to them for the most part in the theater, and the roles really get interesting for women who are 40 and beyond. So it's a wonderful time to be able to do theater.
How has Hollywood's perception of women changed since you've been in the industry, or has it?
It seems to go on parallel tracks. I've never seen so many skinny women with big boobs. Isn't that sort of 50s, but is more than ever there's this impossible body type that the young people are all trying to achieve. And that seems like such a setback. It's so odd. I don't understand it. We went through the 70s. We went through women's lib. How did this wind up happening? It perplexes me. On the other side of things, we have Tina Fey. Would Tina Fey have happened without the 70s? It's almost as though she was the obvious outcome of the 70s to me. This absolute comfort with being a woman and being funny and being powerful. I always thought the movie Legally Blonde did a lot because it was the first movie that I felt came out and said, you can like nail polish, you can like shopping and be a lawyer, you're a girl. You can do both. And I thought it was such a clever movie to have done that. And for those of us who came of age during the 70s and that time, it was like, oh, I get it. It's that simple. So I don't know, it's changed, but it hasn't figured it all out yet because there are multiple messages out there for young females. Speaking of writing, do you write? You know, I actually do a little bit. I was taking a writing class, and I'm not going to set the world on fire in that way, but I have some ability, and I have a few things I'd like to say. There's something that I would like to write that has to do with my childhood. which I think is very original that I want to write about my childhood, isn't it? I actually want to write about the place where I grew up, not your typical childhood stuff, and its effect and how it made a childhood. And another book that I've been writing, it's about halfway done, it's going to be just a little book. I'm calling it Bad Auditions, and it's going to be all about my bad auditions.
I can't let you get away without you telling me about that place you grew up. What was so special about it?
Well, it was in Minnesota in the suburbs. It's called Meadowbrook. It was low-cost housing, row houses, kind of more like you'd see in England than here, where all the families after World War II lived, and all those GIs came home and started families and needed low-cost places to start their families. Typical baby boom place. And it was hard to grow up around people who had a lot of money and all belonged to the country club and to live in a row house. But, it kind of gave away, and it took away and it gave, with both hands. There's something to be said for that childhood, making you want to strive for something more and to feel that you're being held back by a certain level of poverty. And yet at the same time, what it's doing is fueling you in a way that's very enriching. Yeah. And that's kind of what I want to touch on.
That's interesting. One of the things I've heard someone say, and I've used this line several times, is a hungry lion will not, a well-fed lion will not attack you. And I often wonder if we're giving our kids too much this day and age and therefore cutting down on their ambition.
Yeah, this gets discussed a lot in my age group as our children are emerging into adulthood. Did we do too much? Gee, I came home from school and worked, but you could work and go to school and get good grades then. The standards now make it very difficult to do that. Right. But the big difference, I think, is that the families were larger. I grew up in a very Catholic community, and families were huge. No one could get that individual attention in a family. Those same families, if they'd only had 2 children, may have done the same thing and showered them with as much attention and advantages as possible so that they would succeed. But I think a lot of it has to do with these smaller families, starting families later so the parents have more time and resources. And so, of course, you do it for your kids because you can. I don't know how it could be any different when that becomes the paradigm. I'm going to act like I can't do this for you because no one did it for me, even though I actually have the resources. It's easy to say that we gave them too much, but it's a lot trickier to do.
Your children, you mentioned a couple of moments ago, are now out of the house. Are they in the entertainment business?
Not at this point. My son is 20, and he has aspirations in that area. He's so funny that he has a big future if he chooses that direction. And my daughter was in theater for a while. Now she's been pursuing art, and she's quite the Renaissance woman. She's experiencing it all.
Interesting. What sort of comedy does your son do? Is it theatrical or stand-up?
He's incredible at improv.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I think maybe people have been telling him all his life he should be a stand-up. So, when the adults are telling you, you sort of think, I'm not so sure. He has to come to it himself, I think.
Interesting. Well, we certainly wish you the best of luck, and we greatly appreciate
Thank
you spending some time with us.
I'm happy to be here.
Emmy-nominated actress Julia Duffy. We certainly appreciate her spending some time with us. You know her from The Newhart Show, from Designing Women, and numerous other television appearances. I'm Jeff Weeks. We greatly appreciate you watching this edition of Conversations. Take good care of yourself, and we'll see you soon.